So, hello everyone. I'm your host, Jeff Grunland, and um, Nadia is presenting today the physics of astrology, and we're going to get started. It's about 1 hour. We're going to have her give her presentation, and we'll do some questions and answers at the end. If you have something you really would like to say in the chat box down there, that would be great throughout the presentation. And if it's appropriate, maybe we can butt in and ask her these questions, but we'll try to let her give her presentation. So Nadia, go ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I do love questions, so we should leave some room for questions. So anyway, my name is Nadia Smirnova Mierau, and I've been an astrologer a professional astrologer for about 30 years. Don't ask me why I started so early. I'm not going to give out my age, but anyway. So, and I am coming originally from Russia, from Moscow. I graduated Moscow State University. It's like Harvard in New York and in America, and physics department. My specialty was nuclear physics, elementary particles. And I've gone through even half a PhD program, and then our economy collapsed. So I was flushed out from that. And I've been surrounded by skeptics my entire life, which are my friends, physicists, and they always sort of poked fun at me for believing in astrology. And they asked me, how can you believe in astrology if you're a scientist? And I used to tell them that it's not a matter of belief for me. I just know it works. And they would ask me, how does it work? They would ask me, so how does this Mercury that is far away affects my thinking process? I have my own thoughts. I make my own decision. I'm my own man. How does it work? Explain to me if you're a scientist. So early on, I knew it worked, but I couldn't really explain at the time. But then I knew that my friends are not going away. They're always going to be asking me questions. So I thought, let me just think it through, come up with explanation. I think I owe it to them. I think I owe my friends an explanation to why I'm an astrologer and a scientist as well. So, and that's what I did. I came up with an explanation about 20 years ago. I put that all in writing. Then I realized that it's one thing to explain it to my friends. It's another thing put it in a public. And I realized public is not ready, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna approach the entire thing, how I'm gonna publish it. So I kind of left it aside for about 20 years to just sit and wait for the right moment. And the right moment came about a year ago. So I released my framework in the form of ebooks for now, and I'm looking to finish and release my book number 7 in the series of Physics of Astrology as an ebook on Amazon. And then once that is done, then I'm gonna put it all together probably in one paperback. I know a lot of people already waiting for that paperback from me, and I'm working on it. So that will conclude my framework basically on physics of astrology. And we're gonna be talking today about physics of astrology, but every time I do these talks, I angle it differently, which is very, very cool. So today it's going to be about music of the spheres, and it's going to be some music. So I'm ready to start, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my face and start sharing my PowerPoint. Please let me know if you see my PowerPoint.
Yes, we're all set.
Excellent, excellent. So the topic is music of the spheres. And I am gonna get started. So the big question is, how does the moon, the sun, and the other celestial bodies actually affect us on a physical level? And what does it have to do with music for this particular talk? I'm gonna play this video for you guys to get you in the mood It's a beautiful video. And I'll explain why I'm doing this. Pardon. I apologize. The controls of this PowerPoint are a little bit messed up.
It's okay.
So what happens when we hear a music like that? Our ear, right? We all know that we need our ears to hear the music. What happens with our ear? What do we actually hear? Well, some of you, maybe all of you, know that our ear is sort of our device to receive a frequency between 20 gigahertz and 20,000 gigahertz, in that range. For some people, the range is broader. For some people, it's narrower. And sound is, in fact, is electromagnetic wave. And this is our ear. And if you start looking at it and trying to understand how the sound goes into the ear, gets processed by all these organs, and then ultimately processed by the brain to receive the information, you understand that this is a processor, electromagnetic wave processor. It processes the information that comes within that electromagnetic range. With that said, we're gonna talk a little bit about the origins of the music of the spheres as sort of a concept. It goes back to a couple of thousand years ago. Music of the spheres, or harmony of the spheres, is an ancient philosophical concept. This is a great picture that I found in Wikipedia as an engraving from Renaissance, showing Apollo, the Muses, the planetary spheres, and musical modes. So music of the spheres is an ancient philosophical concept that regards proportions in the movements of celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and planets, as a form of music. Pythagoras was the one who discovered the relationship between the musical note and the length of the string that produces it. And he's the one who also discovered the relationship between mathematics and planets that is similar to his discovery in music. The music of the spheres incorporates the metaphysical principle that mathematical relationships express qualities or tones of energy, which manifests in numbers, visual angles, shapes, and sounds, all connected within a pattern of proportion. In the theory known as harmony of the spheres, Pythagoras proposed that the sun, moon, and planets all emit their own unique hum based on their orbital revolution. So the entire physics of astrology concept started from Pythagoras, way before mainstream science has, came to be. long ago, which is pretty amazing. Pythagoras is pretty amazing individual. He starting from his birth, his birth has very unique twist to it. If you start researching on him, he's very, very unusual individual. Later, secondly, Plato described astronomy and music as twin studies of sensual recognition, astronomy for the eyes, music for the ears, and both require knowledge of numerical proportions. This means that Plato had an additional twist to what Pythagoras did, and found, and that we were all talking about 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, Plato found that there is a relationship between astronomy, music, between astronomy and music, and mathematics. Now, what's happening these days? These days, you might hear or may have heard about NASA putting out their spooky space sounds. And if you go to this link, they actually put MP3 files. I'm not going to do it now, but you can actually go there later. MP3 sounds for different planets and different even asteroids. And this is a video on YouTube that I found that actually presents these sounds straight from NASA audio files. So you're going to hear sounds right now. And so forth. I don't want to spend too much time on this video for a reason. So what does Pythagoras' music of the spheres have to do with NASA's planetary sounds? If anybody in the audience can raise their hand and answer that, or maybe I'll just go ahead and answer it for you. So it actually has nothing to do with, both these things have nothing to do with each other. NASA's planetary sounds have nothing to do with physics of astrology or music of the spheres. And however, if you're going to be hearing about NASA's planetary sounds, you might associate it with Pythagoras stuff, and it should not be associated. I just want to make that clear. So what we're going to be talking today about, not what you hear from mainstream and from, and from NASA. We're going to be talking about physics behind astrology that we all know as astrologers, that we know it works. We're going to try to explain, we're going to actually explain how it works. So first of all, astrologers never think much, I noticed, about the actual physical qualities of celestial bodies. They work a lot with symbolism. They look at charts, they calculate, they call the planets by their names, they talk about their energies, but they mostly feel that there's only symbolism in there. And from where I'm standing, all these planets are not symbolic, and their effect is not symbolic. There's no symbolism in their effect. All these planets have physical, powerful physical qualities. And let's see what all these qualities have to do with astrology. First of all, we're going to look at the very famous phenomena, which is lunar tides. And I imagine that not many of you have heard of solar tides, but I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of lunar tides. And what skeptics usually ask me is, how, Nadia, do you see the connection between celestial bodies and us? What is the connection? We're not connected. There's no way that I'm connected to the moon. There's no way that I'm connected to the Jupiter. And what I realized that people are connected to everything, but they take it for granted. One mechanism, physical mechanism that connects us to the planets, to the moon, to the sun, and to all the celestial bodies is gravity. Gravity is a physical phenomenon. It's tangible, and we take it for granted. We don't realize that we walking on Earth and we think we have a complete freedom to do what we want to do, to think of anything we want and do what we want. But people don't realize that we are, in fact, attached to Earth. So if we suddenly decide that, hey, I want to jump and fly, guess what? We're not going to be able to do that because we connected to Earth with gravity. Gravity will not let us do certain things that we might think we might want to do. So, but we do take it for granted and forget that gravity is a tangible physical force that creates a connection between a certain celestial body and us. So lunar nodes, we already know the effect of lunar nodes by watching the oceans, watching the water of the Earth, how the moon goes around the Earth and drags that massive amount of water behind it. So that's why we have tides. However, scientists that work with tides, they're also familiar with solar tides, and they watch the solar tides as well. But for whatever reason, we're not hearing about solar tides. And I will ask you, if lunar tides and solar tides are in fact within mainstream physical phenomena, why don't they talk about Jupiter tides, Mercury tides, Venus tides, Mars tides, Pluto tides? Why don't they do that? Well, you will never hear that they ever do this. Nobody explores the effect of Jupiter tides. Nobody. So next thing I wanted for you to think about, what happens to us due to the sun? What happens to us in terms of gravity? And if you picture yourself and say around sunrise, the sun rises, say on the east, right? And then it has a gravity pull. It pulls you up, and it pulls you up, and then it goes to all the way at the top of the sky. At the top of the sky, right in the middle of the day, it pulls you upright. Sort of gives you a subtle pull upright, so you out and about doing things. Then it starts setting down to the west, kind of pulling you sideways, and then it goes underneath of the underneath of the horizon. And what it does with its gravity, it's pulling you down. And this effect goes every day, up and down. There's a pull, solar pull, up and down, creating our daily cycles, sleep-wake cycle. Scientists who's trying to study human consciousness, and they have no clue why humans need to sleep. They don't understand that. We are very much understudied by our own mainstream science. They never put two and two together that there might be something beyond, I don't know, serotonin, and why the serotonin is increased in the levels at night. So they don't know. They never looked into, gravitational effect of up and down. So let's see how that might work and how we might understand it better than mainstream scientists, right? So what I'm going to show you here is a weight experiment. I call it a weight experiment. And this will demonstrate to you the effect, the physical effect of gravity with the solar and lunar.
Oh no, go to meeting. How did I get to?
Sorry about that.
Yes, so let's see what happens on the full moon. I'm going to stop it right here. Let's see what happens on the full moon and how gravity forces affect us. So on a full moon, we have Earth in the middle, or us in the middle, technically, right, on Earth. Then we have the moon on one side, the sun on the other side. They both pulling us apart. So what I did, I asked my boyfriend to grab two weights. And again, remember that everything is in motion. I asked him to grab two weights. One represents the pull of the sun, another one represents the pull of the moon. And I asked him to start swinging around for me. And I asked him to tell me how he feels while swinging around. So, of course, if you imagine yourself doing that, you would know that this is fairly easy to swing. You can swing a long time. It's effortless and you have even more momentum when you swing around with two weights, holding them in both hands. Now, what happens on the new moon? So on a new moon, we have the Earth on one side, and then we have the moon and the sun on the other side, pulling us into one direction. And what does it mean? So I asked my boyfriend to now put the weights into one hand at this point. And start swinging. Show me what that would feel like. And you could see him struggling right here. So you could see him struggling. So what that does to us is we're out of balance. It's not easy to swing lopsided, but it's very easy to stop. And it makes you feel reluctant to do things. So this is why on the new moon, people don't do as much. They feel like sleeping, staying home. While at the full moon, people are out and about. They want to do things. They want to go places. And in England, they disperse more police forces around full moon because things are happening. Everybody is out and about. While on the new moon, not so much. Now, it's very frequent that I hear, the minute I mention gravity responsible for physics of astrology, I hear skeptics are very quick to point out that the doctor affects the newborn baby gravitationally more than Jupiter does. And that comes from one of the articles published by mainstream sciences to debunk astrology. So, and that statement only applies to this Newtonian formula. If you do the calculation using this Newtonian formula and literal direct approach to gravity by Newton, then calculation will show you, of course, that the doctor will have stronger force, gravitational force towards the baby than in Jupiter. So they only talking about the direct effect. They're not looking at the entire phenomena. That's what we're gonna do. So gravity is broadly misunderstood in our mainstream sciences. I don't know if it's on purpose or ignorance, but gravity is misunderstood within public in terms of our education. And let's look at gravity. So gravity by Newton is a force. There's a formula to it, and it is a force. And this formula works for when that force needs to be calculated. Einstein's gravity is a whole different phenomena. It's actually curvature of space-time. He doesn't talk much about force or any, but it's a curvature of space-time by Einstein. So you don't hear from mainstream sciences anything about Tesla's theory of gravity or Tesla stuff for well-known reasons. However, Tesla had a dynamic theory of gravity. He was talking about gravity being a field of force field. He was talking about ether versus contemporary sciences talking about the space being empty, vacuum. Tesla was disagreeing with that. He was believing in ether as a medium where all forces and all waves are propagating. And so by Tesla's theory, gravity is a force field within ether. Ether has a liquid or fluid texture. So the force field creates a vortex within ether. And this is the man that I encourage you to look up. He's brilliant. He basically took that ether idea and he developed a new quantum gravity theoretical framework, quantum gravity. So it is brilliant. He supports the idea of gravity being a vortex, and vortex is in fact a combination of a force and a curvature of space. And this is how it works. This is what gravity is in ether, in a liquid ether. It's imagine that the ether is all liquid, right? Or fluid, so to speak. And this is what the gravity looks like. It's both force that's pulling down, a 3D force that goes in spiral motion as a vortex, just like water goes down a drain. Now, what happens these days with the traditional science is that they finally came to realization that vacuum is not really empty. And they finally started connecting the dots and seeing that electromagnetic waves have to have a medium to propagate in. So the vacuum is not really empty. It just doesn't add up within quantum physics that the vacuum would be empty. So therefore, what they sort of came up with a fancy name for ether, and they called it Bose-Einstein condensate. And they said that the universe is superfluid. That's the mainstream trying to sort of put their twist on the ether. But if you ever hear about superfluid universe, translation is ether that Tesla was talking about. So what we're essentially talking about in terms of Sun, Mercury, Moon, Jupiter, and all these planets going round and round and around the Sun and around our Earth, around us, we're talking about gravitational waves. It's very important to understand because the skeptics say skeptics only take gravity by Newton to try and debunk astrology. They never talk about gravity waves, nor do they know about it. But when a moon goes around Earth and goes around Sun, the moon essentially creates an oscillating 3D wave, gravitational wave that we live within. And it's a wave has multiple frequencies. And for example, the moon goes around Earth every 28 days. So it's a wave that has a frequency 28 days per cycle. Then another frequency that moon has is 28 days per cycle is the moon-sun combination frequency. The moon frequency around the Earth is 1 day per cycle. The same is for the sun. The sun, one of the frequencies has 1 day per cycle. Another frequency has to do with the entire year, right? It's 36 days per cycle. And the same for the planets. They all have these multiple frequencies in relations to the Earth. Jupiter has a frequency in relation to the sun, which is 12 years per cycle, but Jupiter also has a frequency in relation to the Earth, gravitational frequency, gravitational effect, tidal effect on Earth and on us. Jupiter has 1 day per cycle, and in relation to the Sun would be 12 years per cycle. And the same for other planets. These are all frequencies, and these are all very low frequencies. Of course, very low frequencies, but they are essentially frequencies. And what you hear from mainstream about gravity waves is something along the lines of gravitational waves detected from neutron star crashes. And the article talks about that the blast from the past, because it's so many light waves away, which means it happened like gazillion years before, and only now we're finding out about this gravitational wave that has traveled so long. So those are not the same concepts. It has the same name, but completely different concepts. The gravity waves that mainstream talking about is not the gravity waves of planets. It's a different, something different that they're trying to detect. Gravity waves are energy waves, just like sound waves. And when we think of sound or electromagnetism, we typically in school see something, the pictures are about like that. We are shown the electromagnetic spectrum known to mainstream science. And it kind of starts with radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible violet, X-rays, and gamma rays. Our science takes that segment, shows it to us, and they never say what goes on beyond the radio waves or what goes on beyond the gamma rays on the other side. They don't talk about it. Why don't they talk about it? What, is it just the electromagnetic spectrum ends there abruptly? Or on the other hand, on the other side, does it end abruptly? What's up with that? Right? So this is my picture where I'm extending that radio wave band all the way, because it's continuing. As a matter of fact, it's infinite. It doesn't stop. We go all the way, making the wavelengths longer and longer, longer and longer, where it becomes a wave of the Pluto 200 something years, right? Cycle per cycle. We can also extend that on the other side, but the point for us right now to extend it only on the left side for the planets and the stars. And if I continue this line, it's going to get to the wavelengths of the stars. Gravity is just one of these bands, of energy waves. And these bands of energy waves is infinite, one slowly merging into another, and the names that we have for it, visible, ultraviolet, or sound waves, we just put names to the segments of this broad band of electromagnetic of energy wave spectrum. Mainstream doesn't talk about it. So we're back to trying to understand how gravity affects us. And what you probably already understand is that besides the direct effect by Newton, right, there's something else that's going on. And I call it a transmitted effect. Like, say, the moon affects us directly by Newton with its force. It also affects directly with the same force another person and a tree and a car. And sometimes skeptics ask me, why is a passing car not affecting me more than the moon, for example? And when we look at this picture, we understand that the moon has the same exact effect on the car, on yourself, on your wife, on the clouds around you, on other people. And guess what? All of these other entities affect you back, which means that suddenly you have an effect that has the same frequency, not just directly from the moon, but from all of these other entities back to you. And what happens when you have a wave of certain frequency is applied on another wave of certain frequency, the same exact frequency, what happens? It's too bad I can hear your answers, but what happens is a resonance. And this is what resonance looks like in textbooks, right? So it's the wave and another wave that has the same frequency. When it's applied one onto another, it creates, it doubles, it creates a resonance. And this is what happens on a full moon. This is how the resonance of the full moon occurs. This is why crowds go wild on a full moon. Is, you know, say the full moon is full and it affects you directly a little bit, and then somebody friend calls you, he's also affected a little bit by the full moon, and he gets you excited. Let's do something. I can't sit still. I'm restless. Let's do something. And you hear that excitement. You're also a little excited. It becomes a resonance. You're also excited. Yeah, let's do something. And you go party, and everybody is under influence of full moon. Everybody is affecting everybody. And what happens on a full moon? Frequently things overflow. Trouble happens because things go overboard. Too much of excitement, too much of resonance. And when the too much of resonance, things frequently break when the resonance happens in a too much of a format. And this is an interesting, cute video where the resonance gets too much, and you're gonna see that this boy manages to break the glass. Hold on.
My name's Chase, and I live in California, and I'm gonna try to break this wine glass by only my voice.
So somewhere about here.
Mom, look.
So that's very cute. And this is a professional who does this glass breaking routine, and I'm gonna skip through it. He puts, you know, I just wanted to warn you, don't do that at home. You're usually supposed to wear glasses if you want to try to break the glass and create a resonance. So this basically means that when the power of the resonance is too much, things break. So that was cute. So another example of the resonance is swing. This one is also a great example of the resonance where a simple force
Homer Bridge, Washington, opened only a few months ago, was built at a cost
of
of
the
over $6
wind.
billion. But misfortune overtakes the great structure. These are some of the most amazing. The actual collapse of the world's third largest suspension
wind
bridge.
broke, resonating frequency of the wind broke the entire huge structure.
This apparently sets up a rhythmic swinging of the bridge, which increases with each swing. Finally, the swinging road and the suspension cables give way and plunge into the water below. Fortunately, the only casualties were a car stalled on the bridge.
So that video was meant to show you how damaging and distracting the resonance forces could be. And this is what happens with planets. They pull us back and forth consistently every day, creating the resonances with us. Now, what I want you to look at right now is who we are, what we are. And with this type of angle, I want you to think of yourself as a radio. Humans are, in fact, their brain, their ears designed as a radio. And as with humans, we have 5 main radio stations where are walking antennas receiving all these frequencies, all these broadcasts from planets. And our brain is essentially amplifying these frequencies and processing them. So this is our radio frequencies. We are an antenna that tuned into 5 radio stations. One is for visible light, another one is for the audio receiving, another one is for, we have the skin for infrared, we recognize the color temperature and ultraviolet and stuff, and then we have the nose tuned into smell and the tongue tuned into flavor. So we have 5 major radio stations. What happens with the rest of the spectrum, right? Well, that's whole other story. Some people and some animals tuned into radio stations, and they can recognize and process, their brain can process signals that go beyond the visible spectrum, and that they can hear beyond the common range. Some humans can hear beyond the common range and so forth. So we're talking about planetary broadcast. We're talking about all these planets are broadcasting stations that are sending all these energy waves to us. And the way antenna works, and our brain is basically a processor that receiving that incoming information, process it, and comes out with some further stuff, you know. Our frontal lobe makes decisions based on incoming information. So with that said, how exactly does the gravity waves cause me make decisions and get myself into trouble? So that's the frequent question from skeptics. And here, what I want to show you is that our brain is essentially a standing wave resonator. This is what standing wave is. If you don't know physics, I want to show you what standing waves are. You can Google standing waves to try to understand this better, but this is what they are. So what is human being? Human being is liquid. 17% of our brain is water, right? Even the bones have 22% of water. So we're entirely liquid beings. And our Earth is liquid Earth. I found this picture on the internet that says liquid Earth, and our Earth is liquid. We never think of it that way, but it is liquid. We have most of the Earth are the oceans, and even on the tectonic plates, we have liquids. The only solid stuff that we have on Earth are tectonic plates we're sitting on currently. Most of the Earth is liquid, and it operates as liquid. This is why when it's doing a gravitational dance with the moon, it gets deformed, because it's easily can get deformed because of liquid, and it's also because of centrifugal forces. It gets deformed. That's why it's elongated. It's not round as you see it in mainstream scientist pictures and illustrations. So when we go into understanding of liquid ether, liquid humans, liquid Earth, then to understand how it all works and how it all interacts, we have to look into semantics. If you heard of semantics, great. If you haven't, look it up. So this is what happens when water is being affected by the sound waves, or any energy waves for that matter. We have a liquid that's affected by water. I'm gonna play this for you. And this is what happens here in the speaker. We have standing waves because of certain different frequencies. And the waves have different patterns, again, because of these different frequencies. So essentially, a human brain, the liquid brain, is just like a nut speaker, is affected by all these frequencies, by all these electromagnetic waves, and it is a standing wave resonator. I want you to look at also levitation of this droplet in the presence of sound waves. Different frequencies create different types of patterns that will all remind you of sacred geometry. This one is great, is when heavier liquids are affected by the sound. Oh, pardon this one. Standing waves and heavier liquids. Different music, different frequency. This is what happens to liquids. We're living in a liquid environment. We're living in the ocean. Our brain is liquid. This is what sound does to our brain, or any frequency for that matter. This is another cute video. This is how sound affects water. The water becomes made out of particles affected by electromagnetic waves. And here I would like to show you another great video. I compiled it from different pieces, liquids and music. Vibration. These are liquids reacting to sound. This is pretty cool. So these are a picture of the, again, the liquids affected by the sound. Now check this out. What does it remind you of? This is a Hubble's photo of space, pillars of creation. What does this remind you of? Another Hubble picture of space. This looks like a wave. It's liquid, right? So this is how liquids affect solid matter. How sound affects solid matter. So that was beautiful, beautiful. So you see patterns in the sound affecting solid matter. So the sound or any type of energy vibration of any type of frequency, any spectrum, this is how it's going to affect both liquids and solid particles on Earth. And this is, you will see, if you Google strange patterns on Earth, you will see things like that, where a growth on Earth has certain patterns that have these wavy, interesting patterns. You would never think why it's growing that way. But guess what? It's all electromagnetic effect on this matter. This is an interesting cloud formation, right? Why is that? Nobody talks about it. Again, based on electromagnetic effect in that particular area, the clouds will form based on how they electromagnetically affected. So the waves that we're talking about essentially propagate in circular ways. So and you're going to hear about toroidal shapes, right? Our Earth has the toroidal shape of electromagnetic field, and the gravity waves have also toroidal shape of propagation. These vortices that we're talking about, this is the top part of this toroidal field. So I'm going to leave it at that without further explanation because we have more stuff to go through. So now, if you start looking into semantics deeper, you're going to see that the way the sound affects water and solid matter, it creates patterns that will resemble sacred geometry. And this picture and a little animation or video straight from NASA website, it's a hexagon on Saturn. So some kind of frequencies, some kind of dynamic, gravitational dynamic, energy frequencies lined up for Saturn the way that it creates this geometrical pattern. And this is subatomic world. This is the same hexagram you're going to see in atoms and in subatomic world. And there's a whole other segment on this that you can read within my books where there's more to it. So how do we get from low frequency gravity waves like 200 plus years per cycle to the sound waves which we can actually hear and visible light spectrum, right? Here's what I thought of when I thought of that question is, it's all in the harmonics. It's actually pretty easy when you start thinking about it, right? Because you can receive, as a receiver, as an antenna, you can receive a big wave from the Saturn or any other planet. And you can process, your brain can process that wave as a harmonic of it. Just like if you look at this antenna, for this antenna to receive a low frequency wave, a long wavelengths, right? It only needs the wires to be like, say, quarter lengths. And then it can basically restore the entire wave in its mechanism of processing and amplifying. It only needs like a quarter or something. All the ham radio people, they're aware of this fact. They don't need a long antenna to receive a wave that is very, very long in the wavelengths. So that's how we can process these waves. And what I also noticed that in this harmonic system, you have these nodes, right? You have these standing waves, and then you have these nodes. And if you look into music, you have absolutely the same thing. With the guitar, you have these notes, you have the standing waves, you have different harmonics, first harmonic, second harmonic, third harmonic, and so forth. If you then look at the chart and you start thinking about it, all of the crossings of the signs and houses, these are the different nodes that basically in parallel are there, as well as planetary conjunctions and all the aspects. These are all nodes within the big orchestra. Imagine orchestra. Each different instrument plays different role in this beautiful harmonious music and performance. And all of these nodes, these crossings of the signs and crossing points, the cusps of the signs and the cusps of the houses, they function exactly as these nodes. And another thing I noticed is that when you talk about harmonics, and think about harmonics, they function as fractals. I know it might be too much to think about right now, and you're probably getting overwhelmed. But this is something for your thought. Think about fractals as one big wave is the same as a fractal with one tiny wave in a certain way. This is why we have certain, we say as above, so below, because something big is happening above, it translates into even tiny things on Earth in the form of fractals. This is one of the fractals that you could find on Google Earth. This is a very cute video. We're coming to the close of the lecture. This is a very cute video that I want to show you to just give you an idea. Say this is a different brains of people who sitting and listening to the music. Each brain is liquid.
The only way I found to shake your body free. I've got what it takes to help you make mistakes, to put you through a phase that's harder than it seems. I'm not saying anything. Yeah.
I don't want to play the entire song. I want to leave room for the questions. This video, I encourage you to find and watch. This gentleman, Mike George, I believe, I just found this video recently, is given an interesting twist. He's a music teacher. He's given an interesting twist on Pythagoras' music of the spheres. And I'm going to leave it as enigma for you, so you go and look him up and watch his presentation. I'm ready for questions here, and
Nadia, throughout the presentation, we had a few comments from someone. Their name is not coming through. He or she made some comments during it. I didn't really want to interrupt you. I thought maybe they could still be relevant here at the end. Hi, Jeff. My name is Jeff too. Thank you for your comments, Jeff. I'm sorry I didn't butt into the conversation to mention your comments, but he just made some comments. We are each unique tuning forks, and sound is a vibrational connection we tune into. It exists in realms beyond the merely physical. I'm not sure how you want to address these, Nadia, but they're just, I think it sounds like more comments than questions.
Well, it's not even a comment and question. It sounds like it's what he believes, Jeff, right?
Yes.
It's what he believes. And I get that a lot, where people just make a statement that they believe that it goes beyond physical. And what I find that, and I'm also specializing in explaining anything that's beyond physical, psychic phenomena. As a matter of fact, it's a part of my last book. There is physics and psychic phenomena, and it's what probably he means that it goes beyond physical is we have a misconception within contemporary mainstream science is what actually physical and what's not, because mainstream science is not the true science, it's a belief system. And what Jeff probably means it goes beyond physical, it probably goes beyond what we understand within mainstream science as physics. But what I'm presenting to you goes beyond physical in terms of what mainstream understands as physics. I'm coming from the mainstream sciences, but I'm studying alternative sciences to understand the true nature of what's happening to us versus what the belief system is set in schools and in academia. So would that answer your question or comment?
He writes, correct, and the tuning fork awareness shifts as we grow with it.
Tuning fork, it's an interesting interesting sort of twist on things. I have to process that. I'm going to read those comments later.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting thoughts for sure, Jeff. I'm going to move on. Sue has a question. I have for the smallest particle of energy. Since this subject, I've recently read a bit and have been thinking of a unified law. I'm thinking the angles of what the energy strikes the other particle creates, whether it's gravity or whether it's electromagnetic, because the two seem to be of differing forces, but both are forces.
And in terms of unified field theory, there was one of the slides where I was talking about harmonics, had the abbreviation UTF. I purposely left it on a slide. It's the abbreviation stands for Unified Field Theory. And there are several approaches to unified field theory. One of them you're going to find in, I'm mentioning in my books. There is another mainstream scientist who left the mainstream science, his PhD, left the mainstream science and went on his own and created a model for unified field theory that has to do with sacred geometry within subatomic world. So in my view, my physics of astrology also in its own way explains the unified field theory, because like I said, the mainstream physics does not want you to look beyond a certain electromagnetic band that they allow you to look at within mainstream science. They don't want you to think what's outside there and what's outside this box on both sides. They don't want you to look at it. Therefore, they don't want you to discover that unified field. And if we start looking outside of that box, the unified field is out there. The gravity forces are no different than subatomic forces. It's just different wavelengths, basically.
Interesting. Sue wonders, is what you're talking about Nassim
Haramein, yes. Brilliant.
Yes.
Brilliant. It's a must for every contemporary mind that is curious about this. A must to study, to learn, maybe take his courses, but at least watch his presentations. He has a lot of free presentations of his material on YouTube.
Can you say his name again and spell it?
Nassim Haramein. Nassim Haramein. And if you watch the rerun of this video, you can stop that slide and just take down all the notes.
Great.
His website is resonance.is. Resonance is.
Resonance.is.
That's his website.
Thank you, Jeff. It's in the comments there if anyone wants to write it down. Jeff, also, I believe it's you, Jeff, that wrote earlier, energy waves that may exist in the sound environment beyond our human capacity to tune into. Yes, just sounds like an agreement.
Not a question?
No, I think it sounds like just an agreement with you.
Okay. Yes, and I am preparing a presentation. Actually, I was interviewed within psychic realm for astrology and physics behind psychic realm, and I'm explaining to the psychic people who don't know if there's a science behind it, that think of it that if you are a radio, right, and you're receiving information from big, loud radio stations, right? So, but you are capable of receiving more information through the weaker and other bands, through the weaker stations. But for you to hear that message, all you have to do is either go to sleep, so all your big loud radio stations are shut off. You don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you sleep, right? And you don't feel anything pretty much, right? In that conditions, or in a deep meditation where you're trying to shut your thoughts out, close your eyes so you don't see anything, no distractions. Within those conditions, you will be able to hear those subtle radio stations, other bands that otherwise you don't hear. That's where you get your psychic messages. Through that informational channels. And in the ham radio, if you study a little bit ham radio, how they practice, for them to hear subtle messages, they have to power up the ham radio at night. So they shut off all the loud during the day big stations, completely shut it off, go into bands where you don't hear much. And then they can get some subtle radio stations and subtle communications that they're interested in. It usually is done at night.
Very interesting. Denise Grams wrote earlier, and that was actually the comment that I that I read of Jeff's was actually a response to Denise, who wrote, "It makes me think that crop circles are created by sound waves." And then Jeff wrote,
exactly.
Yeah,
by electromagnetic waves. That's exactly it. I love it.
Yeah.
You guys are getting it. I'm so happy.
And then Jeff's response was, I'll read it again, energy waves that may exist in the sound environment beyond our human capacity to tune into.
Yes, well, we are able to tune into a lot of stuff. All we need to do is practice shutting off our 5 loud radio stations that we typically tuned into. Close your eyes, that's one. You know, go into completely silent environment when you don't hear things, nothing distracts you, and so forth. Go in meditation and go into sleep mode, right? And that's where you get your psychic information. You get the information from what and some people call Akashic records or informational field. You get that information through those subtle other bands that otherwise are not available to you. So that's how you get your psychic messages.
Yeah, and Jeff wrote, "Gotta love the dream landscape." And after that, Monica wrote, exactly is what Kabbalist teachers recommend to get messages during dreams. Exactly.
I get them a lot. I'm a bona fide psychic on top of astrology.
And Melanie writes, "Thank you, Nadia. Totally inspiring. As someone very ignorant about science, I was excited to see images like the radio, tuning forks, etc., as I've been using these notions in teaching astrology for decades without knowing the science. Love your work." And
thank you.
Yeah, sorry. And then someone else wrote earlier, I forget who it was, they wondered if your books are also available. Elena wondered if your books are available in Russian.
Not yet. I originally started writing it in Russian, so I have a bunch of stuff written in Russian, but since I was living in US, I decided, let me first rewrite everything in English and publish it. Once I publish my entire framework, I then am gonna go back and rewrite it in Russian, and I'm actually looking to go back and reconnect with my Russian colleagues and start presenting it in Russia for Russian audience. So if anybody from Russia who tuning in right now, please email to me at Nadia@physicsofAstrology. I would love to connect with you on Facebook, and we'll talk about translating my material into Russian.
Excellent, excellent. Good to hear. Sue wonders if you know the name of the last song you presented on the amazing videos. Maybe you don't know what that is.
Yes, it's if you email me, I'll give you the video link from YouTube. I basically downloaded the video from YouTube, but YouTube has a reference to the song, and I apologize, I didn't look up the reference to the exact song.
That's fine. Sue, you could find Nadia's website, physicsofastrology.com, and I'm sure you have an email address on there, Nadia, that she can contact you?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. Great. Absolutely. And if you guys interested in viewing my other presentations, I have also email me, or you can go to I have a website, astrologyscience.com. There's 2 presentations that I've done at NCGR conference and at the New York City chapter presentation. One is called Physics of Astrology, and it's a lot of it similar to what you just seen, but there are some things that you're gonna hear there would be slightly different. And another one is called Planetary Mind Games. That's an interesting twist on this entire concept that you're gonna love also. They're available at astrologyscience.com. It's a platform, new platform I'm setting up to host webinars and recordings.
That's excellent, Nadia. Well, we'd like to thank you very much, Nadia, for your presentation. It was fantastic. We're getting a lot of gratitude here in the comments. Thank you. Excuse me. So thank you for that. I would like to remind everyone also that OPA is hosting iAstrologer this October, a great place to go an event to go to hone your professional astrology practice. There's going to be some great presenters and great tracks. You can go to OPA's website and go to let's see, what is it? I forget. Events, and there's a link right there. I think right on the homepage you can click it, and if you want to learn more about it. So Nadia, thank you everyone for joining. It was a fantastic presentation, and you'll be able to download this from YouTube, watch it on YouTube shortly. We'll send out a link to the recording this evening or tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Yes, indeed.
So I'm just gonna close it off, right?
Yes.